gas clouds. What if you
That's
drive
right.
into one of these events? Yeah.
And you die in the car while you're driving.
Yeah.
Or you're overwhelmed and you lose contact. It doesn't matter. Absolutely. Remember, methane, no odor.
And colorless, yeah.
Okay, and it's
and heavier than air.
A million
under
times.
Appropriate conditions.
Stays right down nearer the ground usually. A million times more concentrated and available in the ocean than it should be. The professor said he was absolutely overwhelmed, stunned, beyond stunned.
Well, there's an issue there.
Yeah. Hold on, Clif. We've got to do this. Come right. Hold your thought, please. We'll be right back. Okay, and we're back with Clif High, whose famous words, "Profane times demand profane words. Be warned." I'm warned.
Well, you get that way. It's disgusting times. And then to think that BP did this deliberately, or at least the powers that be directed their minions to cause this to occur. There's all that kind of evidence in terms of everyone selling their BP shares before it occurs.
They knew they were having trouble last when you were gathering data for the March 12th report, though, or for this report. For the March 12th report was February 2. They were having pressured trouble with this way early on, and they just said to hell with it, and they kept right on drilling. So, yeah, they knew this thing potentially was going to do exactly something similar to what it's doing. I don't know. These people are like parasites, though. They'll take advantage of anything. An automobile wreck, it doesn't matter. They'll take advantage of it. So
I know, it's disturbing, yeah. Because so many of us would not.
You were starting to say something at the break. Do you remember where we were?
Oh, just about the methane and how it can get into you were talking about the fellow that found the million times higher.
Yeah.
The issue for me is not merely that, because the ice methane, of course, as if it's broken loose to the jostling of everything going on down there, floats up, it dissolves and produces dissolved methane along the way. But the other issue, of course, is the unseen once it's out as a gas. We also have to acknowledge that the oil itself evaporates at a tremendous rate, actually. Volumetrically, it can lose a huge amount of mass in the right conditions, which they have in the Gulf. So once again, I'm very concerned about the ill winds component of this, and the issue of the diaspora, which is the scattering of the peoples. In the case of previous examples, historically, we've only had things like climate change and patterns of movement to go by, but we're going to probably live through something that would be a permanent or unknown in duration. We just would not be able to guess how long it would be if they end up starting to evacuate areas. Let's leave aside the potential for things like the methane explosion causing a tsunami, which is very real if there's any kind of subsidence or rupture down there. But leaving all of that aside and just dealing with any kind of an evacuation, not only do we have the instant, at that point, collapse of the economic system that in any way touches derivatives, and that pretty much is probably everything these days, but at that point we also have to start dealing with the chaos that would be involved, just because the social mass won't move the way we have seen in the past. So our models are not particularly effective in saying, we saw 5 million people or 20 million people in movement with the climate change that we, where they was run by Temujin, the guy we call Genghis Khan. And they did thus and so, and this is how they moved relative to that climate change. Well, they weren't in a situation where they were dependent on automobiles and the fuel for them, and they moved in a asymmetric tribal fashion, so it was more or less disorganized chaos that had certain boundaries, whereas ours will not. We'll have freeways clogged, as you point out, and then we'll have all of the issues of Katrina, especially those with the healthcare system, compounded by the sheer mass of people involved. And then there's the issue of where they would put them. So it becomes logistics at a huge level, even beyond the ability of any they to direct.
I don't think they can direct it. I don't think they're going to try to organize an evacuation in any kind of logical sense. I think what they're going to do is take the CS, the chicken manure way out, and just let it happen, and then try and direct it after the fact. I honestly don't. I don't see an organized evacuation of 20 million people. I just don't.
Well, we couldn't do it even if we tried.
That's what I'm saying.
Dawned on them. Yeah.
No, they can't, and so they're just not going to say anything. It's like if they knew the world was going to end or an enormous asteroid was going to hit us, they wouldn't tell us.
No. So it's in our own interest to start thinking about ourselves in a different way now, and this is part of that paradigm shift that's occurring. And in fact, you see it even on the news, and your previous guest had alluded to it with the various rants at the various governors, and how she stood up for the new guy down there in Louisiana, because at least he's out there. And it's, that's, even if he is corrupt, actually, especially if he's corrupt, he's probably a very good local governor because he's dependent upon the corruption and realizes this and wants to keep things going. So he's going to fight for it. But regardless of his motivation, we're now seeing the paradigm shift where everybody's acknowledging that the empire is defunct in its ability to get anything done. It's overstressed. Even the National Guard can't really commit because it has no resources other than nominal manpower. And at this stage, we're starting to see that shift, and I bet you we'll see the breakdown all in the process of it ultimately becoming an evacuation, all the way down to where you're more or less dealing with probably friends and family building up into some level of tribal collective.
I won't even go as far as to say a crude elemental militia either. It's going to be probably smaller than that. And
it will have to be almost, I would think, no more than 45 or 50 people is a manageable group that can clump together and still be able to be somewhat nomadic and move.
Wow.
And that'll be part of the issue, is we'll have to have food supplies that will, and there's going to be mass death no matter however we look at it. We've already sentenced innumerable people to die of starvation simply because we've removed the protein that used to be harvested from that region of the ocean. As it spreads, it'll continue to impact the protein levels available for humans. Just on a statistical level, we can say, X number of people have just died because, the bluefin tuna won't be breeding now, and so 5 years from now there won't be a harvest that we can have, and so on and so on. We can make these predictions at this point. It's unfortunate that our forecast of 1.28 billion people may indeed be a realistic estimate over time.
Which
not that long a time, actually.
North and South America?
Correct.
Right. Mm-hmm.
And when you start thinking about, if our healthcare system breaks down, statistically, I love the way in which Buckminster Fuller approached things in terms of his methods. And he always used resource analysis, and you can make some very broad, specific cases or general cases from some very specific cases. We know, for instance, that when electricity failed in Katrina, there were people whose lives who perished because that electricity went in the healthcare system.
Right.
So we can extend that over 20 to 40 million people and say, 2 million people are dying the moment that it becomes an evacuation because there won't be the healthcare resources to keep them alive this additional period of time.
Well, and all those who rely on pharmacy refills.
Correct.
We could talk for hours about that.
Or clean water or any of this, because, of course, bearing in mind as the populations move north, so now all of those people that have been purchasing all this gear for an in situ survival are going to have to readjust their parameters, but still stick to those things that make sense. If you've got a water filter, it makes sense to haul that with you. Even if it's big and bulky, in the end, it will probably pay for that extra amount of calories lugging it around because you won't get sick because you'll be able to filter the water for your family. Make sense?
You bet. I just am amazed to think of that many people on the move in a tribal fashion, which is what.
Well, of course, the tribal fashion will come after the collapse, after the social disruption and collapse of them attempting to get around the broken down cars and everything.
You'll end up there, and it's just.
Yeah.
At first, people will try to good-natured people will try to help. They'll take people into their homes, and the food will go twice as fast, and it'll be gone, and it's just going to be an amazing. I wonder what the world response to this is going to be. Of course, we know now the Obama administration has turned down as has BP, outside offers of help for this oil crisis. But if we have a humanitarian crisis where there are a lot of people dying, I wonder what the world will do.
Well, at least initially, there will be some countries that will lend aid. Unfortunately, it'll be stuff that we don't really care about, in the sense that at that point it'll be the offer of, forgiving of debt or the passing back of dollars. And that won't really be meaningful because we'll be in a collective resource pinch within this country that will require some... Actually, the thing we're really good at is we're good at logistics. No other country on the planet is able to do the kind of logistics that we can, and the height of our logistics skill is demonstrated not by our corporate business, but by the military logistics centers that can actually used to be able to get goods from point A to point B at phenomenally low cost for vast numbers of people. But we've farmed all of that out, and yet we're going to need that level of logistics savvy again on a very short order and almost in a chaotic or emergency kind of a basis, where we'll need to shift logistic talent from point A to point B and this kind of thing. And that's really, I think, the only thing that'll cut down on the chaos and save us as we go forward, because it looks like we have to accept the fact that the air is going to be poisoned in the regions in the Gulf. The water is being poisoned now. The air is likely poisoned now at some significant level.
Yeah.
Non-measurable. They won't tell us. We will have infrastructure collapse. We will have such strange things as 3 and 4 generational birth defects that will come from this. And that's already in the DNA now, because those effects have already hit the childbearing population that's been breathing the gases, et cetera, et cetera. And a lot of these effects are unpredictable at a personal level, but very predictable at a large-scale level. So our forecasts are, I think, unfortunately becoming very clear now that we know what the scope of the things that are going to be involved. And then if we also get the Israelis going crazy over their abstraction with
moving their ships, they're moving our ships around.
Over there. Yeah. They're the only enemy that's ever attacked one of our ships and never paid any price, or maybe two. I'm putting them down for the coal until it's proven otherwise.
Right. 19 months.
USS Liberty, let's not forget
that. Right. No, that's right. 19 months. We're July 2010.
19 months from incept date, so that would be April 20th, Hitler's birthday.
It still puts us into 2012, doesn't it?
Correct, yeah. Uncomfortably close to when our data gap gets really serious.
Now that we need to talk about, we will, the data gap in 2012 and what Clif and George's research is showing for us in that time period, which is coming very fast. We'll be right back with Clif High in just a few minutes.